Welcome, learning Zawadi community, to the gift of Black studies, the gift of Black history. Today's focus is going to be on Mahalia Jackson. Before we begin, I need you to go ahead and grab a journal, dictionary, some pencils, crayons, and markers. Without further ado, let's get into it. The agenda today is going to include the word bank, activity, biography, major works, impact today, reflection, sources, and closing. All of this tied to help build the understanding that is important and tied to Sister Mahalia Jackson. So to the right, we have a picture taken by photographer Ray Funk of Mahalia Jackson. Without further ado, let's get into it. So for the word bank today, what you're gonna do is grab your journal, that writing instrument. You're gonna write at the top of the paper, Mahalia Jackson literacy moment. Then you're gonna look up these terms. It's really 3 points, but it's like about 5 different terms, right? And the first one is going to be the invisible institution. Secondly, hush harbor. Thirdly, the Great Migration. Fourthly, Black gospel music. And fifthly, social movements. Even if you have your own understanding of these terms, and you've been exposed to them before, it's important, just so we're all on the same sheet of music, for you to still look these terms up. They'll help guide our understanding and guide our conversation today. Then write the definition for these words and start the video again. For the activity today, on the literacy moment, you're going to answer these 3 questions. Now, you can do an artistic response or a written response, or both. However way you feel like you can express a response to these questions, just make sure that it's clear and it reflects how you want it to be, how you want it to be understood. So the first question is, how did the Black church help shape America? Oof. What's a Black gospel song that addresses injustice? Oof. How did Black churches push social movements? There's some good ones right here. Once you answer these questions, go ahead and start the video again. So Mahalia Jackson. So this sister was born October 26 in 1911. She's a Scorpio. This is around the time of the Harlem Renaissance. This is actually on the actual following Reconstruction. So you got the actual ending of the Civil War, wherein states were fighting to keep and maintain systems of injustice, such as having and keeping enslaved people. Then you move into a period of Reconstruction in which the country was wrestling with how to rebuild now that the states were no longer able to depend on enslaved people's brutality, the mistreatment of enslaved people. What were you gonna do with all of the quote unquote free Black folk who were no longer tied to plantations, right? And so in the midst and in the context of all this, Mahalia Jackson is born again in 1911. She's born in the South in New Orleans, right? And in the course of her development, right, she's exposed to a lot of different experiences growing up and reared in the South. By the 8th grade, and if you know anything about the Great Migration, it's really the process in which a lot of families from the South wanted to pursue opportunities, economic, financial, however way you want to call it, in the North. And so Mahalia Jackson's family basically moved, or Mahalia was able to move to Chicago. And while in Chicago, like human beings typically do, there was a desire just to form relationship, to form community. And Mahalia was able to find that through the church. And so she ended up attending various different religious institutions, one of which was the Greater Salem Baptist Church. And so I want to say while she was in her 20s, she always was talented, like had a very great voice, was a talented singer, a very creative artist. And so Mahalia used her gifts, her talents, to basically share through gospel music. And so one of the ways in which that brought a lot of attention is she recorded this song called "God's Gonna Separate the Wheat from the Tares." And this was recorded in 19 34, and she got paid $25 to record that song. Now, $25 today is not the same thing as $25 back then, but the fact that she was being supported for her artistic ability was encouraging. But this song really pretty much launched her career as an artist, as a Black gospel artist. And she ended up recording another hit song that we'll talk about later in the major works. But that led to tours. She was able to tour the US. She ended up being able to tour internationally. And that international tour was called The Angel of Peace, which took place in the 1950s. Now, remembering where she came from, remembering the conditions that people that look like her continue to endure, they continue to be challenged by, that they continue to face. Mahalia Jackson was always involved or used her platform as a national and at this time internationally known artist to address issues of injustice, to lend her perspective and to lend her people's perspective when it came to politics. And so she was invited to John F. Kennedy's inauguration, where she sung some renditions there. But she also is, and this is a situation that I recently learned just by doing my own research, she was also invited to speak at the March on Washington in 1963. Not speak, but sing, right? And we'll talk about the song that she ended up singing at the March on Washington in the major work slide. Moving forward, though, Mahalia Jackson never completed schooling beyond, I believe, in the 8th grade. Somebody can fact check me if you have to, but just let me know, because we all trying to get better, right? And our grasp and understanding of the gift that is Black studies. But I believe she didn't, I believe the 8th grade was pretty much where she stopped her formal education. Now, she did go to beauty school, and she did like try to, develop that skill set for being able to support herself. But the fact that she got an honorary degree in music is just a testament, again, to her talent, her skill set as an artist. She's been heralded as the GOAT when it comes to gospel music, right? Right here it says Queen of Gospel Music. That's what a lot of folk title her or label her or designate her. But in my mind, and in the minds of a lot of folk, she is the GOAT, greatest of all time when it comes to gospel music. Unfortunately, she ends up transitioning on January 27th in 1972 at the age of 6 years old. Picture to the right, as you can see, is a photo of Mahalia Jackson by Carl Van Vechten, who's an interesting character in and of himself, in 1962, 1 year before the March on Washington. So that's a little biography on Mahalia. We're gonna get into, what is it that when people hear Mahalia Jackson's name, like what is it that stands out the most? Well, here it comes. So first off, one of the songs that after she recorded the song that we talked about prior to in the previous slide with the Greater Salem Baptist Church, one of the songs that really launched Mahalia Jackson's career was a song that she had recorded that was written by a reverend named Herbert Brewster, who was a community activist in Tennessee. This song was called Move On Up a Little Higher, and it was released on September 12th, 1947. This is, I want to say 2 years. No. This is about 8 years before the Board of Education decides to integrate schooling, right? Makes that decision, Brown versus Board of Education. So it's in this context that she records this song. And when she did it, it was a hit. And she was steady trying, and she was, she always had the talent, she always had the skill, but this song is what helped launch her into like across every household in America. It even made it to the Library of Congress, the National Recording Registry. This is what helped her get international recognition, like I talked about in the previous thought about that Angel of Peace tour, the tour in Europe, all of that. She got global stardom, literally. And here's some lyrics at the bottom left-hand corner of this slide, but I encourage you to actually listen to the song on your own time. Check it out. Listen to her voice, listen to her passion, listen to her conviction that she brings to her art. But I'm gonna go ahead and read this. I'm not gonna sing it because, I'm just not gonna go there. But here we go. Soon as my feet strike Zion, lay down my heavy burden, put on my robe in glory, going home one day and tell my story. I've been coming over hills and mountains, gonna drink from the Christian fountain. You know, all of God's sons and daughters that morning will drink that old healing water. And so why was this the song that really launched Mahalia's national and international career? Well, it ain't because Mahalia didn't have the voice to make really any gospel song pop, but when you are wrestling with what Black folk were wrestling, remember this was released in 1947, you have high levels of racial terror, high levels of economic, political, family, social services, stuff like that, not really impacting and benefiting and supporting the Black community. Songs like this were encouragement for folk across race to move forward, to show up, to resist all these different things, right? Move on up a little higher, not to settle for how things were in terms of the status quo. The next song that I want to highlight that really is important to know when it comes to Mahalia, Miss Jackson, is I've Been Buked and Scorned. And actually a third song I want to talk about called How Did I Make It Over? Both of these songs were actually performed at the March on Washington in 1963. And King was so enamored, he was so in love with Mahalia Jackson's work that this is a quote that comes from him. Dr. King stated, "A voice like this comes not once in a century, which is 100 years, right? Not once in 100 years, but once in a millennium." That's the level at which Dr. King had placed Mahalia's work when we talk about pedestals, right? And so it's important to highlight that when we are thinking about just the significant impact Mahalia had and the contribution she made. So speaking of impact, what does that look like? So different people might have different takeaways when it comes to Mahalia, but these are three things that I want to highlight, right? I think she definitely reminds us that art is a reflection of the times. And that's a quote from Nina Simone, right? That daring Black artist and activist, right? Art is a reflection of the times is important because Mahalia Jackson, while a lot of her work was gospel music, it didn't happen in a vacuum, right? The stuff that Mahalia Jackson was singing about were a reflection, literally, of stuff happening in her environment, right? People giving up, right? People being beaten down, torn down, spat on, disrespected, disregarded. Mahalia's music gave folk hope and let them know that while we might catch whatever frustrations and challenges we catch today, there's always a tomorrow. And it's about the effort to making sure that we don't settle for what we've been given. And so art as a reflection of the times is a very key component when it comes to Mahalia. The second is the power of surge singing. So like I said, with moving on up a little higher, if you hear that song, it's plenty of surge singing in there. And it's a theme across different artists, but particularly in the Black church, right? I'm not going to try to give you an example of through my own singing of what surge singing is like, but it's basically a combination of how you flex your voice and how you the passion behind that voice. When you hear it, you can it's like surge singing, right? When I sing, I can't surge sing because I'm gonna be all out of key, and y'all ain't gonna want to hear me. But when it comes to surge singing, Mahalia Jackson made folks' heartbeat like, double what it was supposed to. It made your hair stand up. It made you want to, jump up. It made you want to move. It made you want to groove. Like, that's the power that this technique that Mahalia Jackson employed had, and communities felt that across the board. The third piece about Mahalia Jackson is the connection between religion and resistance. Often, and I'm not saying everybody feels this way, but a lot of people in community feel that the Black church either has no role, or not has no role, but a lot of folk feel that the Black church could do more for community. And Mahalia Jackson, being a product of the Black church, a product of the Black gospel tradition, a product of using religion, using spirituality to communicate messages of hope, messages of survival, messages of thriving, of prospering. All of that was in one woman, right? And she used her platform within the Black church, within within the international community, to help spread messages such as that of the March on Washington, right? To lend a perspective of resistance to the American consciousness. And so this photo on the screen is of Mahalia at the March on Washington. It's a photo by Bob Parent, taken in 1963, the day of. And you can see, that look in her face, like she on top of the world. So, in reflection, pause this video before you do, grab your journal. I need you to write a response to this prompt. I've learned these three things about Mahalia Jackson. Now, we covered a lot of content and you did your own research, so I know you got about 15 different things, but just name 3 things you learned about Mahalia Jackson. And if you want to, you take a picture of your journal entry and send it to Zawadi, ZUHWAHDEE @gmail.com. And in the subject line, put Learn Zawadi, your initials. And I'll be sure to share that on the Learn Zawadi social platforms. These are the sources. Now, I want to give thanks, special thanks, and express gratitude to all my Patreon and YouTube subscribers and viewers. I want to give a special shout out to DeRay McKesson, Eileen Berman, and Lolita Zazzaretti. And I want to thank you for tuning in, for chiming in on this special moment today, covering the gift that is Black studies, the gift that is Black history, the gift that is Mahalia Jackson. I also want to encourage you to share this gift. It's not important that we just sit on the knowledge, that we just talk about it, that we do something about it, right? We take action. Share the gift. Tell somebody about Mahalia Jackson today. Tell somebody about the importance of Black studies and Black history. Thank you for tuning in. Be sure to check out the next Learn Zawadi. And if you haven't checked out the previous ones, check those out as well. Thank you.